Mwerore, and welcome to the Now Tell Us podcast. Yes, Happy New Year. You've missed us, but we are back, and we believe that this year is going to be a great year. And what a great way to start this year, other than having a great person with us today, who is none other than um, Maya Reilly. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And I'm so honored to be your first guest of 2026. I didn't realize that I was going to be your first interview.
Yes, you are the first, and it's such an honor to pay us a visit on the first episode of this year. So we are honored.
Thank you. I'm
Yes.
happy to be here.
Please, maybe you can introduce yourself in the best way that you do it.
No, no pressure.
Yeah.
So my name is Real. My name is actually Maya Lilly because that's something people have asked me my whole life. How did you choose your name? My parents are in an interracial relationship for 45 years of marriage, and I was a mixed race kid that grew up in New York City to a Jamaican father who was born and raised in Jamaica and taught me about Jamaican culture by way of him. And I used to go to Jamaica all the time as a child, even though I was living in New York City and having like the big city upbringing. And then I basically was a performing arts school kid that ended up going to a conservatory and then ending my path completely shifted to focus on environment and climate. And then I ended up in LA as a film and TV producer.
Wow. Such a story. Welcome. It's such an honor to have a person with such a, a story to begin with us. And today we're going to be diving in stories that spark change. And we're going to find out more as we go along. But even before we dive in, let me welcome all the viewers who are tuning in to us. Thank you very much for tuning into us this wonderful day of January 2026. And we are wishing you a beautiful year. And we are wishing that you are going to tell stories that are going to spark change. And let's dive into that. Let's find out more about that from Maya. Uh, I think it could mean such a deep thing for you when you hear stories that spark change because it's something that you've been doing. And maybe dive us into the direction that will please you, please.
Hmm. So I grew up loving stories. My
Mm-hmm.
mother was a drama teacher. I started in performing arts schools in the 4th grade. So 4th through 12th all the way through high school I was in performing arts schools. So I was enmeshed in drama, dance, vocal music. I always loved Shakespeare and the Greeks. You're in Greece.
Uh-huh.
And so I had a really good understanding of what makes a good story. I was also always writing stories. And I ended up going to conservatory at Juilliard, which is one of the top schools for theater in the United States. And when I was there, I had this, what I would describe as a global awakening. It's like I went from this very small, focused lens to this wide lens of what was happening to the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to describe it is probably like an epiphany. I just realized kind of our place as humans in this, very small and very precious earth and where we are with ecosystems. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to dedicate the rest of my time to stories that affect social change. And, there are many theories of the purpose of stories. Some people think stories are just holding up a mirror to society. And you'll see a lot of TV shows have that model where they just hold up a mirror and they show the good, the bad, the ugly, and then we're left with the ramifications of that as the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer the other model or another model, which is that the arts are a tool by which to shape society. And it's a way that we can interact with the world and teach each other moral compass. We can teach each other ethics. We can learn how to be in right relations with the world through story. And, story is very, very important because humans and the human brain, we need meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand like why things are going badly for us so that we can stop doing that, or why things are going well so that we can do more of that. So like, for example, in ancient culture being like, okay, well, how did he get away from the woolly mammoth? How did the little guy get past the orcs and throw the one ring to rule them all, into the fire? How did they get out of the forest? And so all of our stories and fairy tales and myths are imbuing an understanding of the cause and effect connections between otherwise random events. And
Mm,
so what I love about storytelling is it's lifting the veil of chaos to see the deeper meaning of what's actually going on in our own lives, like the underlying pattern of life. And the literary term for that is a story arc. And humans love story arcs.
mm, yeah. And then you now told us about how you got into, I mean, the climate, or how the environment, or all these things that are concerned with that came into your picture. And I like seeing. I mean, I've been hearing all my life, and people have been hearing all their lives about climate change and things like that. And then we have that complex climate science, which every everyday person may not understand how to dive into it. How have you been simplifying this to the everyday person who's hearing this, to understand it? Because I think it's a complex issue to many of us.
Yes. Well,
Hmm.
climate science, unfortunately, has not been the best means of storytelling,
Hmm.
because we've our North Star as the world has been this 1.5 degree mark, right? So the IPCC report that the UN released said we have to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. But I think to the average person, that's like, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 82 degrees Fahrenheit. It's still hot outside. I'm going to go garden. So those tiny levers don't make sense to a lot of people, but on a global scale, those numbers are immense.
Hmm.
They're really, really, really vital, because even a difference between 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius completely changes the type of climate impacts that we will experience. So, for example, at 2 degrees of Celsius global warming, extreme heat, which is the largest killer of like all climate disasters, it will affect 37% of the globe as compared to 14. And what that looks like is that most of South Asia and the Middle East will not be able to go outside without risk of heat stroke and death.
Mm.
And then at 2 degrees, a little north of 2 degrees warming in California, that means 4 times the wildfires. I had 2 friends lose their homes in the historic Black neighborhood of Altadena in California this year. They had
Mm.
about a half hour to get out. It was terrifying.
Wow.
And at 2 degrees of warming, all of the major ice sheets will begin a permanent and irreversible melt. So that means we'll have an ice-free Arctic once in every 10 years as opposed to once in every 100. And this is the thing that keeps me up at night, because the Arctic is basically our global air conditioner. The Arctic regulates our climate, and
Mm.
it regulates the weather patterns by insulating the ocean and influencing the jet stream and something called the AMUC. The AMUC is the ocean current that brings warm water to the north by Europe and back down. So if we lose, this is also a film nerd trivia question. So like the Day After Tomorrow, the early aught film with Jake Gyllenhaal, that was about the AMOC shutting down.
Mm.
And everybody thought, oh, that's not going to happen. But scientists are actually seeing signs of slowing right now. So if that happens, that means Europe is plunged into way colder temperatures than they've ever experienced. And it's going to affect their crop season and their yields of food. Um, all of that ice together would add about 200 feet to the ocean. And that
Mm.
would happen over centuries, and we would have some time to adapt. But that means on the US coast, that is west of I 95. That means every beach that you've ever set foot on will be underwater. That means my beloved beaches in Negril in Jamaica would no longer exist.
Mm.
So it would redraw the coastline of most major countries, and 2/3 of all cities in the world are on the coast.
Wow.
And that's not even, I mean, and that's just a little tiny peek, because I'm not even going to talk about the insects we'd lose, the plants lose, the extinction of other creatures. It's an immense problem, and we basically need all hands on deck. We need everything everywhere all at once to solve it.
So how do we come in now to the common man who is listening to this? How do we come in into whatever it is that is happening?
So I'd like to tell you a little story before I talk about like what we can do.
Go
So
ahead.
one of my favorite stories that I've heard is there was a 12-year-old girl in 1981 in New Jersey who she won her science fair competition. And what she did for her science fair was she had two little Washington monuments. The Washington Monument, for those not in the US, is that obelisk in DC. She had two little miniature statues of that, which she attached two thermometers to. She put them both in glass bowls. And then one she left open, the other she put a plastic film over the top. And then she put a heat lamp on both of them.
Mm.
So this was this little girl in 1981's, a 12-year-old, her attempt at replicating the greenhouse gas effect, where we've basically put a blanket on the earth with the fossil fuel emissions that we've been emitting. So she found that the plastic wrap version got hotter. The temperature was hotter on that side than the one that was not exposed.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about that story is, how did a 12-year-old in the 80s know about the greenhouse gas effect? Because that was not mainstream news back then.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you couldn't Google. There was
Yeah.
no Captain Google. There was
Mm-hmm.
no Chat GPT, right? How did
Yeah.
this little girl know about this? Well, it turns out that her father was a man named Henry Shaw, and he was the chief scientist for ExxonMobil.
Mm-hmm.
Exxon, BP, Shell, Chevron, all the big oil and gas companies knew from the 1950s that their products would be causing massive impacts to the planet. They were some of the people that were researching the climate science. And what's devastating about that fact is that we lost 60 some years of a chance to take action on this problem, because first they said, oh, we're going to help with the pollution that we're clearly creating. Then they switched and said, no, we're not doing anything. The science is wrong, or the science is inaccurate, and it's all lies. And they took out massive newspaper ads and advertising. Like, it was a massive smear campaign. And then in the early 2000s, they switched again to say, oh, well, we're going to try and do our best to help with the impacts. We're going to commit to renewables and phase out, which was also a lie. So what that took away from us was, it took away from all the concerned people on the planet the chance to get a head start on this. And so I tell that story because we have a very real villain in this story. The fossil fuel industry is not an innocent actor. They have known about this. They have lied about it. And it's time, I think, for them to be held accountable, which they are across the United States with massive lawsuits about what they've done, the impacts of what they've done. And there are also campaigns to get them to pay with their billions that they've profited off of the destruction of a livable planet, that the polluters should pay. So I just wanted to bring that in, because I know that piece often makes people the most angry that I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So BP, are you with me, Anthony? BP invented the idea of a carbon footprint. So the idea of an individual carbon footprint, like, how much do you drive? Do you have a Prius? Do you have better lights in your house? Do you have solar panels? That idea was created by them and Unilever to take away the responsibility from these big companies and put it on the individuals, right? So we in the climate space, we have almost entirely shifted away from telling individuals to change their ways. And now we're looking at how can individuals help with these big system levers? Like, what are the biggest leverage points that you can have?
Okay.
And I'll give you another example. So Anthony, in Greece, you have a wildfire problem, right?
Yeah, always we are having some wildfires during the summer, and it's a big issue.
Right. So if you have a wildfire approaching your house with all your beautiful books where you live, what if you only had 5 minutes to evacuate? What would you grab?
Good question. What would I be? What would I grab? Mostly is something that people are not living anywhere these days, which is the cell phone, maybe.
Okay. So your cell phone is very important to you, yeah?
That's what people are. I mean, they can't go anywhere without their cell phone, and I don't know what else could I grab. I don't know,
Do
because
you have
the
do you
cell
have
phone, I'm
children?
gonna reach with other people to other people. I'm gonna get help. I don't know. Tell
Okay,
me.
good. Yeah, no, so that's good. So usually if you have a short amount of time, you grab the most important things. You're
Mm,
not going to go like book by book on your shelf there and like make a pile of all your books, even ones that you don't like. You're not going to take those in the car with you. You're going
yeah.
to grab a very few items and go.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this is a metaphor of we have a very short amount of time with the climate crisis to really fix the problem
Mm,
before it gets drastically out of hand. Like the IPCC report that the UN did basically marked 2030, which is 4 years from now,
mm-hmm.
to get off fossil fuels. So if you have a short amount of time, you're basically picking the biggest leverage points you have, right? You're
Yeah.
getting your cell phone so that you can call for help, you can call your family, you can find out where the fire is. So I would argue the same thing with like all of your audience and listeners. We need to be acting at a point where we're really in our individual actions focused on what are the bigger leverage points. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, changing light bulbs is good. I do that in my house. I try to live in a way that it reminds my spirit to take action by like, refreshing the things around me. But we have bigger levers. So I'll give you some examples of systems change. The plant-based movement for like vegetarianism and like replacing meat, which is a huge carbon emitter. Agriculture is a huge carbon emitter.
Mm-hmm.
They used to focus on meatless Mondays. So every individual stop eating meat on Monday. That was a big campaign back when I've been a vegetarian for about 25 years. And that was big when I was first coming up as a vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, a lot of plant-based movements are switching to default systems. So if you go to a conference and they're feeding a bunch of people, the default meal is vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want meat, you have to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that the default isn't meat, which has a higher carbon footprint. And so they're changing conferences, they're changing panels. Eventually, it would be changing businesses, airplanes, so that you can still get meat. The option is still there. It's just that the default in the system is a lower carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So what I tell people when they ask, well, what can I do? The biggest things, in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm not a climate scientist, but I am knee deep in the science and I talk to a lot of people on camera.
Yeah.
We have to vote in climate politicians, people who know the gravity and understand the science and are willing to throw down with everything they have for that end. And we have some good organizations in the States like Climate Hawks, League of Environmental Voters, et cetera. We need to support world interventions like the UNFCCC, which the US just withdrew from. And
Mm-hmm.
it made me cry 2 nights ago when we said we were withdrawing. Um, we need to divest our homes, our cars, not just our homes and our cars, but our towns, our states, our grids, our businesses, our pension funds, our banks from fossil fuels. And there are tons of banks that are emerging that do not invest in fossil fuels. You could look them up. There's a good website called Banking for Good where you can look up banks based on whatever criteria you want. My favorite criteria is like divesting from fossil fuels.
Okay.
Um, so that your money is not going into future fossil fuel investment.
Mm-hmm.
Chase Bank invests in future fossil fuel investment by $96 billion. They are the highest investor in fossil fuels. So
Okay.
have Chase Bank, get out. Get out.
Mm-hmm.
know, and I have a list I can give you after this that you can share with folks that are listening. That is just a nice compilation, a curated climate list of all of these links that I'm talking about. And
Okay.
then companies that are intentionally stalling climate action, we need to push them to do better or boycott them. And one boycott that's really working in the States right now is the boycott against Target. Black folks basically saw Target take away DEI, diversity and equity inclusion initiatives,
Mm,
because of the current administration. And all these Black folks said nope. And then we basically voted with our wallets. And we not only got the CEO's job, who got fired, but we also lost them 12 billion.
mm,
And so there's a lot of leverage we can have with our money, our vote, our homes. We have to electrify everything as much as possible, and then electrify our cities and just do everything we can to get the systems off of it as well.
mm. Wow, wow, such a story.
I hope I didn't just intimidate you.
I believe people are enjoying that. Let me say hi to a few people who have joined us. We have Maxi who joined us and is saying hi. Hi, Maxi. How are you doing? I hope you're doing good. And then we have Yasin, who's also joined us on this live broadcast. And if you have questions before we are off air, you can always ask questions. And this to do with climate change and things of that nature. And we'll be glad to answer you. And some of these people that are here are mainly people who are interested in content creation. And I
Yes.
see that you can, I mean, you've got quite a following on the internet. I've seen that. Can you maybe tell us about it and how it's helping you with you telling stories, and maybe also how these people can come in and be of help to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish?
Yes. So my company is called The Years Project. We did a TV show called Years of Living Dangerously that was produced by James Cameron, who did Titanic and Avatar.
Wow. Wow.
And it premiered on Showtime and Nat Geo about 10 years ago. And it was
Uh-huh.
basically the biggest climate story that or TV show that has been done since in Hollywood.
Mm,
It
mm,
won an Emmy. And from that show, we gathered a very large social media following. And we have a really big group of influencers that also are a part of our network. So, we have Facebook, Instagram, all the social platforms, but our reach is about 750 million now because
wow.
of all these influencers like the John Baptistes and Mark Ruffalo's and Coldplay who push out our work as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so I have the honor of producing all of our original content. And so I've told stories in Cancer Alley, in this like deeply polluted part of Louisiana where the petrochem industry has built on polluted plantations, on plantation land that they've put these like polluting plants that are spewing cancer causing chemicals into the air around these historic Black communities. I've done stories in Hawaii with indigenous Hawaiians fighting for community solar from their monopoly utility. I've gone up to Anishinaabe land to fight pipelines going through like sacred birthright wild rice lakes
mm-hmm.
of the Anishinaabe that were the part of their treaty rights as natives. I've gone to Hopi and Navajo lands, looking at people bringing solar to unelectrified homes. I've gone to Detroit and looked at Black folk who were veterans who came back to Detroit, and it looks like a war city because it's been completely disinvested in. And so they started to rebuild the homes there in a much greener way. So I've had the honor of working on all these different stories. And basically, what I do is I bring Hollywood level storytelling, because I lived in LA for 15 years and did unscripted TV shows, feature docs. I was the producer for a documentarian that we did this film called Generation Wealth, which
Mm-hmm.
was Amazon's first theatrically distributed documentary. What I do is I bring all of that Hollywood know-how of story content to groups on the ground that are fighting climate fights in their communities. And then we gift them this content so that they can use it to win their campaigns.
Okay.
So one of my favorite stories is, when East Palestine, Ohio had a train derail that the officials decided to blow up vinyl chloride over the town.
mm,
And it's vinyl chloride is a carcinogen. Very bad decision. And we went in with our camera crews and we asked the community, what do you need? And they said, we want to get vinyl chloride banned. So we told this really riveting story with scientists who were testing the water, community that was fighting back against the governor, that were basically trying to live in their, hometown that they love. And then we targeted that to the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in America. And because of our cuts of this documentary, they put vinyl chloride on the list of chemicals to be banned, to consider banning.
mm,
So we're connecting. So again, back to our original idea of holding up a mirror to society. We don't believe that. I mean, you can do that. It exists. But we believe that you can build in the fabric of what you want into the story. And that's actually, you're in Greece, Anthony. That's arguably what the ancient Greeks did in storytelling.
mm,
That's a very old technique of like, let's teach people through example, through story.
mm, mm. And that's wonderful. And then you go right to where the story has been happening. You don't go and tell their story. You ask them to tell to tell their story themselves. Because
Yes, which is very important because
yeah,
people
that's
know their own story.
yes, and they are the only ones who can tell it the way it is.
Yes, but all I do is I mix their story with what I've learned as a producer, which is there are certain elements of story in this Western storytelling tradition that
Mm-hmm.
make people want to watch something more than others, and everybody can tell their own story, but I basically elevate whatever their story is with my know-how. So, I add in urgency and high stakes and emotional vulnerability and often starting in the middle of the action, like people, if you're watching a story and someone's like, when I was born, it was 100 degrees outside. I was born in a small town of, that's not starting in the middle of the action. You can find that out about the character later, but start in whatever the thing is. What's the conflict? Start in the
Mm,
conflict, because at the end of the day, a story is someone facing a problem and figuring out how to overcome it. That's what a good story is. And if you think about the stories that your relatives have told you over the years, usually you remember the ones that they had to overcome something, even if it's small, even if
yeah.
they broke their glasses on the way out of the house and they had to figure out how to fix the glasses. Usually that's the piece of the story that you remember, is them figuring out the problem.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Them is that they call it in film the heroes or something? How do you go about that? How is it for someone who's new to this?
Do you mean like the hero's journey?
Yeah, the hero's journey. How does it go?
Well,
Someone who maybe, yeah.
the hero's journey is something I've used, and I'm sure most storytellers use. It's not always used. Sometimes there's like the anti-hero story. Sometimes there are like multiple hero stories. But the hero story basically is like, that someone's living in a normal world. They have a call to action. They start out on a new journey, and then they hit a bunch of obstacles on that journey. They usually hit the worst obstacle at the climax, and they have a dark night of the soul where they have to wrestle with, am I going to give it, is all lost? Am I going to give up this journey? And then they finally overcome. And then when they reemerge after winning whatever battle it was, the world has shifted. They have learned something. Their story
Mm,
arc has changed. And so then they usually return to the old world as a changed person, and they offer insights that they gleaned from that experience. That's the basic. And ironically, I think that's what BP was doing when they did that carbon footprint idea, when they were trying to tell us, because it was a little bit of the hero's journey of like, you guys can save the planet, you can eat veggie burgers, and you can change your light bulb, so find out how you can save the planet.
mm.
And only now we're being like, well, but we also need to rein you guys in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you. So we will be coming right in. And Jess actually says this is interesting. Thank
Oh,
you, Jay,
good.
for that feedback. We appreciate.
Thanks,
And
Jay.
yeah, we are asking you to become a part of those people who are going to tell the stories that are going to spark a change in their own environment, in their own family, in their own society. Yeah, we are welcoming you, and
And we need you.
and we
We
need
need it.
you.
Like I said, we need everybody everywhere all at once because there's no country that this is not going to touch. There's no amount of wealth that will shield anybody from this. And there's no other planet to escape to as much as the Elon Musks would like.
Yeah. So, any stories that you have uh, that you've done outside of, because what you've shared is basically focused on the US and things. I mean, it's a worldwide, but major stories outside of the US that you can that you may have covered.
Well, that's my next goal.
Okay.
That's something that we're really working on this year at the Years
Mm-hmm.
Project. So we're a nonprofit and we're funded by, thank goodness they exist, funders that deeply care about climate. And
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage anybody out there that is interested in storytelling, which I think personally is the most important way to shift culture, to contact us. But we basically go where the story is with the funder. So we're actually in talks right now about doing a piece about land rights all around the world, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm particularly interested in because it's about indigenous people having the rights of land so that they can be the correct stewards of the land. And what's amazing about that, in Indonesia, Asia, South America, the Amazon, everywhere, even though it's all different cultures, everybody already knows how to live in right relation to the planet that they've lived in right relation with for, you know, many centuries. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's really inspiring to me that we have indigenous here who already know how to do this. We have all the solutions we need. And we just need to let them be the stewards of the land that they already were the stewards of for hundreds of years.
Mm.
That's a piece I'm excited about that'll be outside of the US. And
Yeah.
then we're also working on another documentary that's about regenerative farming, which I hope will bring us to Rwanda, as well as Colombia, Guatemala, and various other places in Central and South America.
Wow. Beautiful. So Jay tells us that they are already a storyteller at school about nature. This is wonderful.
Oh, I love that. And
Yeah.
that's, Jay, that's really important because we live in a society where we have like a very humans based value system where like our economy, everything is around humans. But humans are a part of ecosystems. We're not better than them. We are a part of them. And that's the only way we're really going to survive from an environmentalist perspective is if we recognize that we are just as important as or not more important than elephants or mycelium or redwood trees or oceans, you know, that we need all of these elements in our world to survive. So nature is a very important story.
Mm, beautiful. Beautiful. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you for all that you are sharing with us, Maya. We appreciate. And I know there is someone who may want to follow up with you out. I mean, after we are through with this episode, how can they do that?
So you can follow Years, the Years Project, my company. You can follow us at Years of Living
Mm-hmm.
or at the Years Project on all platforms. You can follow me at Gung Ho Eco on mostly on Instagram is where I post the most. And then I have a curated climate list, which is a Google Doc, which has links on all of the ways to get to understand the science really quickly about climate. And I tell all the news that I follow on the regular. I'll send that to Anthony and maybe you can post that for people as well. So
Can
at
people
Years of Living, at Gung Ho Eco, and a curated climate list.
and can people find all these through your website? So we share your website right now.
Yes. So theyearsproject.com is our
Okay.
nonprofit.
I think we have it there. That's the earsproject.com. The
Yeah.
one
And you can see all my work on there.
yeah, you can see all the work there. You can follow her on that. I mean, from that point, and yeah, just connect with her, connect and get to know much more about these stories that spark change. Yes, and then we have one more contribution from Jay. He says, okay, what Jay talks about
Oh, yeah.
throwing plastic or toxic stuff in nature.
Yeah, so plastic is a big problem. We're
Yeah.
currently trying to do a world plastic treaty, which hasn't succeeded yet, but countries are all around the world are trying to figure that out. And plastic is the fossil fuel industry's last ditch attempt to stay alive because they know their time is limited. So they're switching to plastics, and plastics are made from fossil fuels. So plastics are a really big problem. And those plants are often situated in Black and Brown communities who have been there historically. And so we really need to address that problem urgently, along with the climate problem. So good point, Jay.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay, for that contribution. We really appreciate. Now, before we go, Maya, tell us something that you really want us to know before we leave this episode so that we don't.
Mm. Well, you had me thinking about Kenya because before everybody joined, I was talking about going to Kenya for the first time. And there's a quote by Nelson Mandela who says, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." And what I love about that quote is I as a climate activist and storyteller around climate, I often don't have hope. Like I don't have a lot of hope. I think this is a really steep hill that we have to climb very quickly, and we have to do it as a world, and that's going to be very, very difficult. But what I like about that quote is he's saying it's a choice. You can choose to have hope. And so every day I have a meditation practice where I choose to have hope, and I choose to have hope by what I do, by planting an organic garden where I'm not using pesticides that will kill so much in the surrounding environment. I work, my job is helping with the climate crisis. So I'm choosing to participate. I choose with my vote about who I want to vote into office, who has so much power. So I think there's no threshold beyond which we can stop trying. We have to just keep trying. We can't go from I don't understand climate to it's not solvable. That's a very strange journey. The journey is, oh my God, we have a very big problem as the world. And then we have to do everything we can because every tenth of a degree is a difference in lives lost.
Mm,
So there's no point by which we can stop trying.
wow. And then we have people like Jay who think that they are a bit too young to make a difference. Speak to her.
Jay, I would argue that the biggest thing you can do is talk about this, talk about climate, talk about it to your family, talk about it to your friends. Sometimes the reason we don't have enough action is because not enough people are talking about it. They're not making it a part of their daily activity. That's a big deal. And that idea is not mine. That's a shout out to climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe, who is also very popular in the United States. She's always talking about talk about it. We have to talk about it, make it a new normal thing. That's just as big as voting, arguably. And then when you're old enough, you can like register people to vote, get the vote out.
Yeah. And I say you are never too young to speak. That's what you're doing exactly here. Jay, you're not too young to say something, and someone is going to listen to you anyway.
Yeah, and Jay, think about Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg, she protested outside of her school in Sweden. She sat down on the ground, had a climate strike. She did it by herself because she had read about the UN IPCC report and was very concerned, and she sparked a whole global movement. She was too young to vote. I think she was like 12, 13. So, if she can do it.
If she can, then Jay can.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, we have comments still coming in, so we can. Yeah, this one is saying this is Mike saying geoengineering plus artificial habitats plus rapid evolution with GMO. Uh, what is he referring to?
Yeah,
Maybe you can address.
I'm not sure what the question is here.
Yeah,
If
me
it's like a
neither.
criticism.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, but I'm guessing it's a criticism of all these things, which is, yeah, we're kind of wreaking havoc on ecosystems. And
Yeah,
again, it's because we humans think like ecosystems are ours to do with as we want. But I think that that concept is not very helpful to us in this current state where we're literally getting kicked off the planet.
wow, wow. So this has been quite a show, and we thank you very much, Maya, for coming.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you
this.
very much for coming. And just a reminder to someone who could have joined us as we are going on, if you want to follow up with Maya and cover more the stories that spark change, please go to theearsproject.com and connect with Maya. And once again, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Mark is continuing there. So until next time, this has been your host, Anthony Morore. And together with our very wonderful guest, Maya Lilly, we are saying bye for now.